the last video, I said some things, and after thinking about them, it occurred to me that I may have chosen a rather poor wording. And what I mean specifically is that it may have sounded that I wanted to make it some sort of a rule that a villain can't make the reader feel sympathy for them. But on the other hand, again, after thinking about it some more, I absolutely don't think that it should be some sort of a rule that a all villains are sympathetic, and especially these days, and it's really obvious in Asian media outside of Chinese novels. Those have quite different tropes, but in terms of female characters in those stories, I mean Korean and Japanese, I feel as a reader to be forced by the author to automatically take the side of that female character no matter what they do, and they almost never suffer any consequences no matter what their actions cause. Usually, they are not even acknowledged as something bad, something done in bad faith, and it's obviously even more prominent in what would be perceived as a villainous female character that anyone with any sort of decent moral compass should feel that their actions are bad. But here I am almost expected to just either ignore that or forgive that or just gloss over it using some sort of trope that it was all for the greater good, or was just following orders, or had some terrible things happen to them in the past, so their current actions are thus forgiven. And it feels that the authors genuinely believed that. And it feels to me that the effort to make the villain feel more humane, or bring the actions and decisions that the villain made closer to the reader, make them understand, on the other hand, undermines the actual evilness that an antagonist, in my opinion, should be primarily consisting of. Maybe that's why I took such a hard stance on this, and that would obviously, now when I'm thinking about it more, create more problems, create antagonists, evil characters that actually have no character, have no story. So I think that I should strive to strike a balance, because if we look into the history, the previous stories told, there are multitudes of just purely evil, be there to just be evil male characters, and they are usually not balanced by their female counterparts, let's say that way. And even genuinely well characterized, well built female antagonists are, in my eyes, from what I've read and watched, again in 5 digits easily, very rare. I need to be careful when I'm talking about this, especially when I was giving the examples from the Eastern media, that I don't step over my own line. Really want to keep things in the positive ish sphere, and I'm going to at least try to keep it that way. I have to say that this is the very first time that I've ever properly articulated these gripes and aspirations of mine in terms of creating characters and reading about characters in stories, be it protagonists, antagonists, or side characters, and world building in general that I would like to talk about as well. And I'm glad I did because it definitely helped me sort out my thoughts and focus on what I think is important for creating a story that I, and purely just I, would truly enjoy without any sort of checkboxes that just irk me so much in other stories, and putting it into words I think helped a lot with that. I also do want to talk about competence of my villains, antagonists, and how I would like to avoid creating antagonists that are just incompetent, doing obvious mistakes that no one would ever make, which will be a rather brutal struggle because I am the very first person who would admit that I'm not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, and thus creating characters that fit the world setting, that doesn't overstep the rules that I've set up for the world, and still are able to pose a significant threat to the protagonist will be a real struggle, which I am quite welcoming of after challenging myself to even record these videos, try to actually improve my English, and talk about positive things, things that I like, which storytelling is definitely part of. I just wasn't aware that my own storytelling could be something that I like. Now, for Asterix, he left Cleopatra's palace after delivering Idefix with the message, and now strengthened by a different type of potion, he is on his way back to the construction site after successfully completing his mission, after a short scene where he is speeding through a line of Roman soldiers, sending few of them flying, one landing on one of the catapults, to be precise, directly on top of the ammunition, which the crew, unfortunately for the just landed soldier, sends hurling towards the palace on reflex. We see Caesar and Caius Sepulus overlooking the bombardment and commenting that the attack head on was such a great idea. Unfortunately for them, they are not yet aware of what's going to come to bite them. A short scene, a reunion between Asterix, Panoramix, and Obelix. Asterix bringing back Idefix, and Panoramix commenting on the fact that the potion didn't wear off, a statement that he retracts right after seeing Asterix being covered in, well, marks of the potion that he received from the courtesan. And right after that is the scene where Caesar gets informed by a subordinate, one that Caius Sepulus choked in his Darth Vader moment, still suffering from some throat problems after that. He gets informed that there is someone who wishes to speak to Caesar, which turns out to be Cleopatra with her entourage of about few hundred people riding on this giant mobile throne drawn by humans. She politely informs Caesar that when he bets, he should play fair, and that Egypt is not a conquered region of Rome, and that he and his soldiers will leave immediately after they repair all the damage they have caused by the bombardment. She is rather persuasive with her words, and thus Caesar complies, to Obelix's great disappointment, because he was not yet done torturing the poor Roman soldiers, and after the combined efforts of the Romans and the construction workers, they finally finish the entire palace just in time before the last grain of sand falls in the giant hourglass that was measuring the time before Numeramis has his intimate date with the crocodiles. And after the grand opening, where the queen herself has the honors of cutting the tape to reveal the palace to a dumbstruck Caesar, then there is the reward ceremony where Numeramis gets, as promised, covered in gold. Panoramix receives some interesting manuscripts from the library in Alexandria. Caesar is also true to his words and bows to the queen, admitting to the lost bet and proclaiming that Egypt is the greatest nation of them all. Then there is the interior of the palace where Caesar and Cleopatra get to experience some of Otis's inventions, one of them being a lift that they called no effort because it takes one no effort to move up and down. Unfortunately, that's only for those riding the lift because the lift is operated by the poor crew of the pirate ship and they have to put in quite a lot of effort to move people up and down. And then we get a scene where Caesar and Cleopatra are overlooking the gardens, and then there is a small reward scene for Cleopatra winning the bet, and for Caesar as well for, well, enjoying the time spent with the queen. They do seem rather keen on conquering each other in this scene. And then there is a huge party celebrating the completion of the palace. Obelix, for example, eating a lobster, maybe the one from the documentary that replaced the scene of inhuman violence. Also, Numeramis is trying to impress one of the courtesans that usually follow the queen with some dead jokes and unfortunately has to try desperately to explain his jokes to the unimpressed lady. Asterix gets some alone time with his chosen lady Gimekis, delving deeper into the Gauls' customs, and then the credits roll with some mid-credit scenes where, for example, Caesar has some problems getting admitted into the party, even though, well, he's supposedly the biggest guest of them all, but the list of the invited guests has some problems and he has to deal with that. Even Caius Sepulus, his plus one, is admitted faster than he is. Then a few more scenes with the other gentlemen on the party having more or less luck with the ladies. And that's finally the end of Asterix, Obelix, Mission Cleopatra, which I have to say, admittedly, is probably not a very good film by critic standards or even general audience standards, but it's definitely one of the movies that left a great impression on me when I was very young, and even now, when I saw it after a few years, I haven't even thought about it and just watched it because of these videos. I'm very happy I did because every moment that I have spent talking about it and before that watching it, I watched it when I was still talking about the comics is just to see what I actually remembered and what escaped my failing memory. And it was a great time, and I'm glad that I talked about it. And for the next video, I think I'll do a wrap up of Asterix, just a small look back, and then I'm going to do a new thing, very challenging thing, which I've been postponing slightly, but now I think that I'm ready for it. So yeah, that's it.